Thank you very much. A very warm and sincere meeting on this winter day to everybody who can join us live, or those who will be watching later this broadcast. Very welcome to you all. It's great to see those of you on screen. I've been looking at each one of you, and I think I know most of you, so it's really good to see you today. I've been really looking forward to today because it's about one of my passions, which is curriculum. And we've got with us two people who really do know about curriculum in great practical senses and at a theoretical level too. I always sort of thought of the curriculum of everything that happened in the school, those intended things and sometimes the unintended. And I remember from my studies many years ago, there was something called the hidden curriculum. So I was always looking in cupboards and things for the hidden curriculum because I thought it was lurking somewhere. Anyway, I'm Neil Hawkes, those who don't know me, and I've had the privilege to be the founder of values-based education, which I began that journey many years ago, but it's at the time of going to West Kidlington School in Oxfordshire and really looking with the most wonderful community, not just Neil Hawkes, this was everybody. We all joined together in partnership and community to see if introducing a values vocabulary would make a difference in helping the children to learn more effectively and also to develop their character. At a local school not far away was one Bridget Knight, and Bridget's there. Wave to us, Bridget. And this was back in 1993, to be precise. And Bridget said, "Oh, Neil, I've heard interesting things about your curriculum. I'm quite curious. Can I come and watch an assembly and sort of be around the school?" So I thought, yeah, okay. So Bridget came along and she became really interested in what we were doing, and then in her own headship developed it further and did marvelous things before moving to Herefordshire as a senior advisor. And she really worked incredibly hard to just enthuse Herefordshire schools to develop a culture that was values-based so that the curriculum could sit within that culture and flourish. So Bridget's the CEO of values-based education. And Bridget, I'm indebted to you for all your passion and hard work, especially being a teaching head now, because after the senior advisor's position, you dive straight back into the school, a bit like I did when I was a chief advisor of the Isle of Wight. I went back to a headship, and you did too. And it's great that we're led by somebody who has their feet firmly in the curriculum. So thank you, Bridget. And may I introduce too someone who doesn't need any introduction to those of us who follow education and have done for a number of years, and that's Professor Mick Waters. I've known Mick a long time, I think, really. We knew of each other, and we've actually, I always remember one occasion, Mick, where you and I gave talks in London, and I either followed you or you me, and we were given our feedback afterwards, and one of us had 98.4 and the other had 98.3 in appraisal, and I can't remember which one it was, but I'm sure you had the 0.1 more than I did. Mick too, as head of the QCA, produced the most marvelous document, which is this. It's about the big picture of the curriculum. And I've kept this pristine copy all these years because QCA under Mick really worked hard to really think about what a curriculum should look like. And other documents I have from Mick's time here. And he said, under the confident individuals, he said they should have secure values and beliefs and have principles to distinguish right from wrong. And I always felt that Mick put the values dynamic really at the heart of of the big picture. So thank you, Mick. So we're really honored to have you both here tonight. And now I'm going to hand over to Mick.
We're very excited today that we have Mick Waters here to talk about the work that you and Bridget Knight are doing on the values-based curriculum. There's quite a buzz going around it, so we're delighted you're here to explain a little bit more about what's happening. And I wonder if I could just start with the fundamentals, and perhaps you could tell me just a little bit about what actually a curriculum is. How would you describe a curriculum?
What a lovely question to start with, Nigel. I think for me, the curriculum is whatever we plan for children to do in our schools. It's the entire planned learning experience. So when children are involved in lessons, we know they're in the curriculum, but actually they learn wherever they are. So in the rhythms, the routines of our daily life in school, in the events that we put on for them, such as visits or opportunities to take part in performances, or in the things that are laid on after school or before school, and different environments around school. Whenever they're involved in any of that, they're in the curriculum. So if children are involved in a practice after school, in a band, to be in a performance, that's actually the curriculum. A lot of people call that after school work or extra curriculum, but it is actually our plan to help them to develop through that experience. If they're browsing for a book in the library and trying to work out where they'd like to go next in their sort of literary experience, that's the curriculum. They're not out of class, so therefore they're not learning. They're learning about self-selection. If they're in assembly, or if they're doing a test in the hall, that's the curriculum we've chosen to give them at that point in time. And of course, some children have social or emotional relationship problems, so they might be in a nurture room, not with the rest of their peer group. And in that sense, they're still in the curriculum. We're not sort of moving them to a different bit of the curriculum. Or when children were involved in something like Red Nose Day, or that day when Pudsy's, what's that called? Children in Need. When Children in Need comes along, and we're sort of helping children to take part in something charitable, so that they work out how they can support people who are less well off, in a sense, than themselves. That's the curriculum. And I think the big thing for schools to grapple with is, how do we build every moment of every day into a rich learning experience for children?
So it's quite a wide scope, and probably wider than some people would imagine. So when people talk about a school curriculum, is it a matter of just describing that well in documentation?
Well, look, documentation is important, but the curriculum itself only comes alive at the point where it meets the child. So we can make a curriculum in London in government and send it to schools, but we haven't actually made anything yet, have we, except a booklet or something on the web. It's when it comes alive with the child that it starts to inform, and the curriculum starts to clarify or reassure or intrigue or amaze, as it unveils new areas of learning and builds upon what's already in place in the child's mind, but helps to extend it and take it further. So until that point, the curriculum is an abstract, isn't it? It's what the government or the school or the teacher expects all the children to be offered in terms of learning. I mean, in the last few years, there's been a lot of talk about closing the gap. At first, that was about children who were sort of notionally falling behind. But over recent months, it's been about closing the gap, the learning gap that's occurred as children have been disrupted in learning through COVID. Now, the gap between the planned curriculum and the actual experience of the children, the experience curriculum, is probably the gap that, if we could bridge it, would have the most significant impact on pupil achievement and standards of education generally.
Given that we've got a sort of values-based perspective, and I know Bridget will be talking about it in more detail later, but I wonder if you think that we should start with purposes when we're looking at the curriculum.
Purposes, yeah. Purposes are absolutely, they're what drive it, aren't they? We've all got purpose in what we do. And I think that's the thing about the documentation. The curriculum isn't a static thing. It's what children live and breathe in their school. And it's not what we put in our filing cabinet, but what walks out of our schools into society that's really the curriculum. So that means we've got to have purposes at the heart of what we do. I mean, a curriculum should surely help children to be secure in themselves, able to take the step from home and community into the big wide world. You'd want the curriculum to help children to develop the way they think about others and contribute to society in a positive way. So our curriculum is something that gives the children the richness in experience that will help them as they go through school, but then beyond school into adult life. And they should look back thinking that curriculum brought joy to my learning, and it also brought real purpose in what I've become as an adult.
Many people see the national curriculum and school curriculum as well, for that matter, the statements, as being sort of a set of steps, a sort of organization of content for learning. Is that how you see it?
Yeah, that's right. A lot of people do see the curriculum as a sort of series of steps, a route through learning, a course, and sometimes we call it, don't we? We're going on a course when we get older. They sort of see it as a series of, take the content of the curriculum and sort of narrow it down into lessons and forget the events, routines, and all the other rhythms of the school day, and then start to give the curriculum out in a sort of series of tablets. So you take a tablet on a regular basis. So for maths and English, you take a tablet every day, a few fronted adverbial tablets and a quick long division tablet, and gradually you'll get all the tablets and then you'll be okay. And then, of course, you add on the odd geography or a history tablet, and now and again, not too often, and a couple more occasionally, a few doses of art or music. But I think that's a really pedestrian, almost old-fashioned way of looking at how we organise learning. There's got to be a more nuanced approach to it than that. So it's a question of how we see the curriculum. I personally don't see it as a ladder and a linear curriculum that can be climbed rung by rung and really sort of lived until you fall off. I see it more as a scramble net where you can go in any direction and your learning makes connections because you're sort of seeing opportunity as you go. And I think we've got a beat in this country and in other countries in places, this notion that the curriculum is sort of a trial by ordeal, or being at school and getting through the curriculum is an enemy to conquer. I mean, one of the sad things about exams and tests is they give children the idea that you've got to conquer learning or beat it or trick it, rather than enjoy it and embrace it and take it forward. I prefer to think of the curriculum as a friend to the child. It wraps around to enable learning. It would be a sort of beautiful tapestry for me, with a pattern of learning that's magical for the child, with interweaving experiences being so irresistible that they never want to put this cloak down. It's something they want to wrap around them and keep with them all through the life.
Very exciting. Want to be at your school. Mick, just one final question, if I may, in this sort of initial session. That my sense is that in quite a number of countries, and in England in particular, there's a lot of emphasis on knowledge, and some people talk about a knowledge-rich curriculum. And within the context of this values-based curriculum we're thinking about, where does knowledge sit? Is it more important than skills or attitudes?
I don't think knowledge is more important. I just think it's important. And it's always been important ever since schools were invented. Knowledge has been one of the things that we try and help children to build. And I don't think anybody would say otherwise. But we are surely moving away from knowledge being this sort of ability to swallow and regurgitate facts. And we need to be sort of thinking more significantly about how children build knowledge in a really constructive way. Now, recently, there's been some quite good work done on disciplinary knowledge, the knowledge that fits with the different subject disciplines, so that children understand that scientific knowledge is different from artistic knowledge or mathematical knowledge, or different again from historical or geographical knowledge. And that's what makes our branches of the curriculum extend and expand. But there's also substantive knowledge, which is so important. That substantive knowledge is that knowledge which helps you to, all of us, to make sense of the complexity of the real world, where different disciplines play together and sometimes against each other. So in schools at the minute, I keep hearing people talk about sticky knowledge. I'm not sure if it's different from slimy knowledge or dry knowledge. It's a sort of funny word that's come in. The idea that if we keep going with children, the knowledge will stick. I mean, you want it to stick, but you want it to be pliable and movable when they're there. And we can't just see knowledge as sort of sticky stamps to adhere to children as though they were envelopes. There has to be a sort of sense of direction, an address, if you like, to enable a journey, or otherwise it's simply static knowledge. And I think it's an area, I think attitudes and skills are vital, and knowledge is vital, but knowledge has become one of those areas where we need to think deeper than we perhaps have been over the last few years. So it's not just about facts. It's how would it be if we really got children to consider the knowledge of relationships and how relationships work? How would it be if we got children to really build a knowledge of how processes and actions work, which is actually what skills are. Knowledge is, processes and action. And don't children need a knowledge of society and civilization and the complex nature of achievement and discovery and the way civilization over time has made amazing steps forward, and at the same time often put in side effects that later we then have to clean up and deal with? And don't children need knowledge of the sorts of jobs people do in society that keeps it functioning properly, so that they start to understand how we're all interdependent with each other? And that's why I think as children mature that they need introducing to what many people see as contentious issues, that things like environmental sustainability or Black Lives Matter or social justice generally are all examples of incredibly complex issues that often in schools we're sort of encouraged to move away from and teach just a very simplistic outlook. I mean, if time allowed, we could explore this extensively, but just as an example, in Kensington Gardens in London, you would find there is a statue of Edward Jenner. In 1858, it was placed in Kensington Gardens as it was removed from Trafalgar Square, where it had been for 4 years. It had been there for 4 years to celebrate his discovery of the vaccine for smallpox. And actually, it discovered the process of vaccination. But it was moved 4 years later because pressure groups didn't want it in Trafalgar Square. They didn't want Edward Jenner's statue there because, first of all, there were anti-vaccine groups, even then, and many of them were in the medical profession. And then the military didn't want his statue there because they disliked the notion of a seated civilian sitting among their statues of famous warriors. So if we look at those issues, anti-vaccine, statues, they're not new issues. We're having those problems now, but actually in 1858, they were having the same issues. A few weeks ago, Wales, the Welsh government, unveiled a statue of Betty Thomas, the first Black Welsh head teacher. And it's not long that we started wondering why there aren't so many female statues around and statues of people of different races and different ethnography. And these are contentious issues. I mean, in schools at the moment, in our schools at the moment, the Titanic is a sort of staple for year 6. And why is it we still teach and think about the sinking of a boat 90 years ago, when actually, in the English Channel just a few days ago, 37 migrants slipped under the surface of the water with barely a mention in our schools, because that's so contentious and difficult to grapple with. That's why I think we need a conversation about subject disciplines and values linked to knowledge. So where do values lie in subject disciplines? How do they influence them? And how are they influenced by them? And that's why the work that Bridget is doing and what she's going to work on in the next part of this seminar is going to be very, very important.
Mick, I just love hearing your views. You've got such an interesting perspective. Thank you so much for your time. Neil, back to you.
You, Mick, and Nigel for that. And Mick, you've been listening to yourself, and I know when I listen to myself, I thought, oh, I wish I'd said that, or why did I say that? And I just hand back to you for a few moments before Bridget, just if you want to say a bit more. You said so many gems, which I was busy writing down. I just love that notion of the interwoven thing that the children can be in to experience the curriculum rather than the steps. Marvelous way of thinking about things. And I'm interested too, because we in this country differentiate knowledge in a way that other countries sometimes don't. A knowledge curriculum for most basic curriculums in the world is to do with everything that you do, as Mick described. So we're a bit more pernickety in England particularly. Anyway, Mick, would you like to say a bit more?
Well, thanks, Neil. No, when I look at a video like that, I think I wish I'd shut up 10 minutes earlier, actually. I didn't think I wish I'd said some more. I was trying to set out the next part of the session in which Bridget is going to sort of explore some of those issues about where values sit in subjects and where the subject of values can be really deeply explored. So I'm looking forward to seeing where Bridget takes us next, and looking forward to seeing whether people have got things to ask when we come to the end of that bit.
Okay, thank you, Mick. So straight over then to Bridget. Bridget.
Great, thank you, Neil. And that was magic, Mick. And I could have listened for all night. Mick and Neil have been my inspiration, and you can see why, can't you? You can see why I'm indebted to them, and I hope that you're going to be indebted to them too, and that we'll just take this discourse a little bit further in the next session. So I'm going to share the screen now, and with that, take us into the thinking about the power of a values-based curriculum, and really that main point about, could our subjects be working harder? So what is a powerful curriculum? Well, Mick's just eloquently outlined what that is for us. The curriculum is a living, breathing reality and not just a piece of paper. And I think we get so trained, so used to thinking of the curriculum as the thing in the file, the thing that's written down. But of course, it's actually, what does it do for our children? And our contention is that a values-based curriculum is a gift that can gift children the wherewithal to navigate the world. They're making their own assessments of the world through it. And in doing that, they're discovering about themselves and about the world and about one another. And the beauty of that is that it's something based on criteria that they themselves have helped to formulate. They engage in the values-based discussions. They engage in the thinking about what are values and how do they work for me in this situation. So I think of it as a bit like giving children a lens through which they can look outwards and inwards too. And why a values-based curriculum? Well, this comes down to what kind of learners we want to grow. And what I've discovered through my years of teaching is that when we anchor our curriculum in values, when we go through that sheer discipline, actually, of having a valued focus each month in school, then what we're doing is we're creating an enabling ethos. We're creating this curriculum of delight in a climate of delight. And knowing very many people on the call and the fact that you're on this call today, tells me that this is what you do day in, day out in your working lives too. And something interesting that I've noticed about values, I initially was intrigued by values for its kind of softening effect, you know, the way it helps gently improve behaviour in school and improve attitudes and relationships. But over the years, I've been very intrigued also by its strengthening effect, the way in which it brings a kind of power and energy to everybody's thinking, and enables us to look at all aspects of ourselves and all aspects of our lives. And perhaps central to all of that is this, the way in which we hold children in unconditional positive regard. I mean, that's a mainstay of our work, isn't it? And it's that helps children build those relationships with themselves, with others, with their world. And that, of course, as we all know, underpins the ability to do anything and to do anything well. And it enables us to then put our values into action. So it's about teaching our hearts to believe, and then when you believe, you can do it. But it also gives an objective lens. You know, when we have values, we're able to look at ourselves and each other and the world in a way that perhaps takes out some of the emotion and helps us to develop a really good stance on what we're looking at. All done through modelling and leadership, which is a most intriguing and subtle and complex matter. Some of you might have heard of the meme theory, and this is all about the contagion of modelling, so that the notion is, of course, that we're all very responsive to those around us, and implicitly we pick up on the signalling that goes on, and that is the explicit signalling, of course, and the implicit sort as well. But there is in humankind discovered an impulse to the good. So we are actually drawn to the positives, and positive people are the most influential people by and large, because we tune into that, the kindness and the goodness that we know innately that we need to survive. So it makes absolute sense that there is this virtuous energy that comes from good modelling, good leadership. The more we do it, the more it spreads, the more powerful it becomes. So it influences us to be better people, as Jo says. And then it's what's on the inside that's important, isn't it? And nobody I've come across has put it better than Saskia, age 9, who said to me about doing reflection and how it helps her to find the real me, which, you know, when we think, if we believe that the mind is everything, what we think we become, if we learn to look with kindness when we look within, then we can be kind with ourselves, be kind with other people too. And again, you know, we're creating this climate of delight for everybody to grow and develop in and to thrive in. And in the world of values-based education, of course, these are all the things that wrap around, that create the atmosphere for all the things that we do in school. And so the point about then doing all of that cannot can our subjects and our subject teaching work harder for us? So the contention that I'm proposing is that our subjects can serve a deeper duty than maybe sometimes we allow them to do in our schools. We teach the requisite knowledge and skills, and those are all important in their own rights, and each subject brings intense and immense value to the learner in its own right. But perhaps we can deepen the experience of those subjects by drawing out the values and the ethics that are inherent in those subject areas. And I think that when we start to look at values and subjects in that way, we discover how much the subjects have to offer in this regard. What I found too is that it isn't about taking longer, finding more time to do more from the subject, but more about a way of looking at subjects and our subject teaching. And I find it just gives greater meaning and purpose. And I find that working in this way too is fascinating for the children and gives them a kind of reality through the subjects. So I'm just going to take us through what that might look like in using a few subjects as an exemplar. But just to mention this very important point before that, which is about ethical vocabulary and critical thinking. So in values-based education, what we've discovered is that, you know, we become defined by our values, and in helping children to develop an ethical vocabulary, we're helping them to shape beliefs, to shape a sense of who we really are. And so the language of values is really important, and it's really powerful, because those words, they're more than just words. You know, when we think about values like love and peace and honesty, they're more than just nomenclature. They're more than names. They're more than even just adjectives or even verbs. They become carriers and guides and comforters. They become aspiration. They become the joy. They become our ability to engage in the paradox that life throws at us, the conundrums, the sometimes unanswerables, unfathomable questions that life and issues such as Mick was sharing with us just earlier open up to us. And we can become to define ourselves and live our lives by these values. But it's giving children the access to this vocabulary, like opening doors, myriad doors, and helping our children to build a bridge between the values thinking and the subjects that they come across and they meet. So if we take a subject like science, for an example, being really explicit through the vocabulary in science, we can show and demonstrate and share wonder at the glory that is the natural world. And there are just so many great opportunities here. I'm sure that you're already thinking of examples yourselves. I'm sure you already do this, and maybe you do it more than you realise. If we just take as one example of so many, Key Stage 2, life cycles, looking at the life cycles of humans, birds, insects, flowers, animals, trees. The values that are the roots of those concepts of life cycles, that might be gratitude, interdependence, service, restraint, maybe. The cycles themselves teach about the fundamental aspects of how nature works to maintain harmony and balance. And through our values, we can really draw out then what responsibilities we all have, therefore, to look after the planet, look after one another, look after the creatures that live on it. We can investigate life cycles and investigate how we can do perhaps the least harm to our planet, perhaps how we can cause the least harm to one another through the choice of our words, through the choice of our actions. So what this is all doing is raising our awareness of how values have meaning, values have life in subjects, in life. They are our life. And we're just helping to gently illuminate those possibilities. And the subjects just offer so much. Those are just a couple of examples in science. If we take English, well, as again, you all know, the opportunities in this subject just abound. And the fantastic children's literature that's available these days, so many opportunities to really help children engage at a really deep level in those complex matters that Mick was alluding to earlier. The kind of matters that make us actually feel quite uncomfortable as people. We can help children engage in those through story, through discovery in text. I've just chosen some pictures here that illustrate some little wrist books we made. Who knew you could make a book that could go on your wrist? And these are actually little values books that the children made in year 2, because what an opportunity to develop writing in a way that was so meaningful to them. And another opportunity, just one of so many, personification of values in year 6. So here's an example of a personification of peace, which was written by 10-year-old Jake. And so many fabulous reasons to write metaphors and similes, and to have, what's that thing where words all start with the same letter? To do loads of that, and onomatopoeia as well. And again, the children just loved it because it was so meaningful. They can make it their own. And what an opportunity to just deepen the teaching of values. Values through art. I love doing values through art. And again, so many opportunities. Here are just a few examples. The little foil characters on the left. We looked at Giacometti, and he's famous for his little silhouettes of people. And we looked at Giacometti, we studied him, and then in our own creations, taking inspiration from him, we looked at what values we would want our characters to show. So the children there have tried to describe their favourite value through art. The poppies, the sea of poppies on the right, inspired by Georgia O'Keeffe. And we looked at all of her work, and we looked at her work through the value of peace, because some of her poppy work is particularly fabulous. So great opportunity to make and create, and at the same time be talking about peace and the opposite of peace, and when actually you can't have peace because you've got to stand up for something, and you know all the really complex, paradoxical conundrums that run through the value of peace. and how we actually achieve peace, linking it to remembrance. And then just another example of silhouette making and using art to exemplify our values. So again, just a few examples of the richness on offer through these different subjects to show our values that I think also serves to enrich the subject. A final one, values in modern foreign languages. And you know how children squeal with delight when they're meeting a new word. And they love the shape and the texture of it on their tongue. And they are so refreshingly inquisitive about a new language. And, you know, so many opportunities here, they just abound, don't they, for teaching about ourselves and one another and making those gaps between us and the other become smaller. Because the minute we step into someone else's language, it's like stepping into their shoes. So the geographical and cultural differences and gaps between us, just they suddenly shrink when we start talking about values through language and giving children the opportunity to meet their foreign neighbour in this way. And of course, all these opportunities to engage with what it means to be French, in this example, what it means to live in France and use this language, and how you might approach a festival like Christmas if you're French. These are all teaching about values and teaching about glorying in one another and taking away suspicion of one another and respecting one another. So many opportunities that these subjects offer. And those are just a little bit of an exemplification to hopefully whet your appetite and get you thinking about what you can do in your school, maybe even more. And if not that, then maybe just to make you feel really proud of what you're already doing, because I think sometimes we're doing these marvelous things in school, we don't realize that we're always doing them. But in case you're thinking, so what, so what, all of that, and I know none of you are, because I know I'm preaching to the converted here, but I rather like this little ditty that the children at our school came up with. In all that we do, our values shine through, and it works for us, so why don't you try it too? I think the so what, the outcomes are that all of this, talking about values, giving children those immersions in values, giving children those opportunities to flourish and thrive in a values-based atmosphere. All of that brings capacity for thinking, for feeling, for connecting, for being curious, for dealing with paradox, for dealing with disappointments, for dealing with and becoming a growing person. And then when you're someone who's got capacity to embrace things and embrace ideas and embrace opportunities, then you've got ability. With that comes ability, and the ability to understand ourselves and make connections and look at our world and be compassionate, kinder, nicer people. I think that is the achievement of a great education. And so I hope that has given an opportunity now to just, along with those amazing thoughts that Mick has led us with, to start thinking perhaps a little bit differently about our curriculum and about what we want it to achieve. Thank you.
Bridget, that was just exquisite. The depth of understanding about values that you now have is just, to use that horrible expression, mind-blowing. In the sense that, you know, it's interesting. I've been involved in this subject matter probably for over 40 years now, and it's incredible how one goes on learning and understanding at different levels. And you've helped me this afternoon to, you know, really go to another level. Both you and Mick, you know, looking at this. I've been recently working with a group, an international group, that's very, very worried about the fourth industrial revolution that is upon us, which is artificial intelligence. And we can have all sorts of clever people inventing all sorts of wonderful robots, but unless the human being that programs them has ethical intelligence, we're going to be in an even bigger mess than we are now. So it's totally imperative that values-based education is at the heart of any curriculum. You'll all remember that little saying, which I can't remember totally, from the principal of a school in New York who was Jewish, who said, what's the point of having educated Eichmanns? Eichmann was somebody involved in the Holocaust, a very highly educated man, in inverted commas, educated, but as a character was loathsome, you know. So, you know, this values-based curriculum that you've both described has to touch the hearts of people, as well as giving them the knowledge to do all the wonderful things we do. So that's why I believe the knowledge curriculum and what I call the basic curriculum needs to sit together now as equal partners, and not have won the ethics just as a little add-on on a Friday afternoon. It's so important to ensuring that sustainability is at the heart of curriculum. Otherwise, my grandchildren probably won't be able to survive, which would be dreadful, beyond words. So anyway, thank you both. May I open it up now to other colleagues who are listening in for their reflections, comments. Please don't be shy or hold back. You've all got stuff you can contribute. So who would like to say something now? I can. Rebecca, were you leaning forward to say something then? No. I just saw your hand going forward. I thought, unmuting. Oh, good. Well done, Natasha. Off you go.
I find it quite useful for from Bridget to sort of see the day-to-day things of, like, how does it apply to the subjects? Because as a school, we're thinking of we're revising our subjects this year into next year to get ready for the next academic year, of how to you know, it's building up the knowledge and the skills, but also we're at a point where we could also think about how the inner curriculum is applicable to each subject. So I found that really useful. So thank you, Bridget.
Oh, that's a pleasure. And I mean, you know, you'll be doing all these things instinctively, and I think part of the point of what I've said is really to say it's okay. In fact, it's more than okay. It's really good, because, you know, I think we can get so channeled down the path of, you know, what was it we had to cover, and have I covered it, and am I allowed to do this? Is there time to do this? And I think it's just glorious when you open up a subject and look at it through a values lens, as I said, and let the children see the possibilities there. You know, it's almost like letting that subject just be still a little bit and speak for itself, you know, because all the different subject areas, maths and design and technology and art, they all have their own values that they can convey. And they're all really, really important in their own right. But something happens when a subject is allowed to speak through values, and the children really see it, and they absolutely connect with it in a way that they don't forget, I find. Yeah, so yeah, all power to you. Take your curriculum in that direction, Natasha.
Yeah, definitely. It is you do realise hearing about it, you do think, well, actually we do that, but it's sort of making it explicit to yourself, recognising what we have done already and what you could do next.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much, Natasha. Someone else to follow?
You know, I always have something that I can say. I was waiting to see if anybody else wanted to speak before me. I think what came out really strongly, and I think something that we're looking at doing, and it's really important, is that the words about the intertwining, the threads, the scramble net, not the ladder, and just finding all those ways of doing it. And I think, Bridget, when you pulled out the subjects, it's definitely about, you know, that there's a lot of time pressures on people. There's a lot of curriculum expectation. There's a lot of progress, actually, and I think it's just finding those ways and that intertwining of things, which I think is really important, has come out really strongly this evening.
Yeah.
And I know that we're working hard on in terms of, you know, how can you do this? You want to do it. It's how can we do it? And I think it is finding that way through subjects is absolutely perfect. And I think it's about communicating. If we look at what children may be communicating in terms of behaviour, we kind of assign a name to that. We say, we understand that you're whatever the emotion is. And it's almost like when you see children learning or thinking or exploring something, then you can almost put your value to that. So you say to them, this is showing the value of, and this is, so that you almost start from what they're communicating and how they're being, having created situations that allow that to happen. So like the things that you've shown us, but I think then you can just sort of say, this actually really does show. It's the lens, like you said, the lens out and the lens in, and actually picking up on that and talking to children about that. And I think lots of the words I'll take away, and I think others will take away, is I think that there's, you know, there can be an impression that sort of values is soft and gentle, and it is. And it absolutely needs to be soft and gentle. But I think what you've done, and you spoke about it in words, but you've shown it as well, both you and Mike, it's strength and it's power and it's energy. And I think, you know, if you can have those together, then I think that makes for something quite wonderful. So that's come out to me this evening. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Anne. Go on, Bridget.
I was just going to say, well, how brilliant, because that was the intent. So I'm so glad that came over, because that's been really the point of this endeavour, to show that values run through the academic life as well as the you know, the personal life as well, and that you know, it's mutually supportive, and I think, you know, when we see the curriculum as a friend, I love that expression, Mick. Curriculum as a friend, and the tapestry, you know, that really makes it. That really makes the why of what we're doing clear for me.
I think what Anne was saying was really interesting, that And the question before, was it Rebecca talking about rethinking subjects? One of the problems we've had over the last few years, but it developed before that, is that a lot of people get the idea that there are a lot of things we've got to teach children. And then when we've done that, if there's time, we'll try and help them to be real people, and we'll help them to develop some values, and we'll think about relationships, but only if there's time. And I think what both Bridget and I have been talking about this evening is that actually we've got to make time work for us so that we get the children to help themselves to be the sorts of people that are going to make a difference in society, going to make a difference in the world, and going to make a difference in their own life. And the subjects are one of the things that helps us to do that. But they're not separate things. They're integrated every day. There used to be a big argument about whether the world should meet children in subjects or not, because in the real world we don't see subjects. They splash in a puddle and they do science. They don't realise they're doing science until much later. But somehow we've got to see the way we organise our primary schools and our secondary schools with maturing children as opportunities to explore all these things together, not in separate entities. And we segregate enough things. We don't need to do any more. Let's bring things together and make them work.
Mick, that's a brilliant conclusion, I think. I'm very aware of Zoom courtesy, and we did say we would finish around 5:30. So I won't, and you're all busy, you've all got things to do. Nigel's holding up his hand. So before I conclude, Nigel.
I know we're going to be very quick. I just wanted to ask one question because I think it might be very interesting to people. But Natasha raised a really interesting point that I think most schools struggle with, which is there's the beauty of values, that you have to develop values that are right for your school in the way that's right for your school. But particularly for schools that are starting off, it's quite challenging to know how to integrate these values, the values within the curriculum. And I just wondered if Bridget and Mick could talk very, very briefly about what resources might be available for schools, but in particular, if you could just have a mention about the book that you're writing. So I just think people here might be quite interested to hear. We don't have long, but I just thought before we go, that might be nice if you could just mention that.
I'll jump in first and say, first of all, I expressed my apologies to Natasha for calling her Rebecca and my embarrassment at doing so. So I'm ever so sorry. And with that, really, to say that the book that Bridget's just producing and has produced really does explore so many of the issues that we covered tonight in much more depth. And it does draw out the fact that if we're considering any subject discipline on its own, and you'll notice I always put the word discipline behind subject, if we're considering a subject discipline on its own, then we need to rethink and start saying, well, there's subject discipline knowledge, but there are also values to be gained through that subject. There are aspects of learning which teach children skills and attributes that will last them through life, that they can get through those subjects. And the subject can hold hands with other subjects. And one of the problems we get, I think, particularly as children get to 12 and 13, is to say, which of these subjects do you want to stay friends with and which do you want to walk away from? And many people in later life wish they'd stayed with some of the ones they rejected a long while ago. Bridget's book's smashing. If you when it comes out, just get hold of it. It's really good.
Bridget?
Well, thank you. I think just to say that Neil and Mick and Anne and others have all been part, Sue on the call, all been part of creating this book, and it's, you know, it isn't a it's work in progress really, and by which I mean that we're conceiving it to be part of thinking about a different curriculum and putting forward a notion about a way of thinking about the curriculum that more and more people are becoming interested in hearing about. So it's a a call to arms a little bit as well. And furthermore, to say that all the things that I know that you'll all be doing in school, you know, could be contributed to that curriculum too. And I think, you know, the more evidence and ideas that we can gather, then the bigger and the better it becomes. So I'd love to hear from you if you've got ideas for me.
Thank you very much, Bridget. Yes, do send your ideas to Bridget. This is going to be a really influential book, I think. So we'll look forward to that. Christmas reading, read anything by Professor Mick Waters. It's brilliant. I have this by my bedside, thinking aloud, which he's squirming about now. But, you know, I love this book. Really challenges you to think about, you know, what the purpose of education is all about. And I don't think there's ever really been a national debate, really including the general population, about what education's for. So that really stimulates. The inner curriculum has been mentioned, and if you're developing that inner world of the child, then do read this at Christmas too. I'm joking. Enjoy yourself at Christmas. So may I bring this a lovely seminar, and thank you both to Mick and Bridget, and for Nigel for all the hard work you've done in the background too, Nigel, as always. I think this has been an outstanding seminar for us, and I for one am totally enthused as always to go out there and make a difference. And may I thank each one of you who are working in schools. You are the heroes of our society. You're out there really molding our future. You are sending messages to the future. The children in your schools will be the adults in 20 years' time that are forming our society. And the fact that you give them values will ensure that we have the sort of society that really will flourish. So a heartfelt thanks from me, and thank you very much, and have a lovely evening. Thank you, Bridget.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thanks for coming.
Bye-bye.